Hello. Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Cinema Bias. I'm one of your hosts. I am VideoDrew. I'm Drew Grant. And with me, as always, we have the lovely other host.
Hello. Hi. I'm excited to chat the arguably final holiday movie of the year, the second to last movie of 2020, and I'm so excited to start a whole new year of Cinema Bias with you. Can you believe
me too.
it? We've been doing this for I feel like for a crazy long time now. How long has
It's
it
been a while. It's been like at least since like March or April, or maybe April. It's only been since, because that's when we started doing Videodrome and then Josie and the Pussycats. I still had my rental car from LA from coming to visit for the free for all. So we're talking about like late March, early April. That's how long we've been doing this. It's been a while.
Oh, it's kind of nuts. I'm so excited to get started with the new year. I'm excited to try this movie. This is a weird movie. I'm so excited that I was forced to watch this movie because I wouldn't have been able to watch this movie without your
really.
Mm-hmm.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this. If you guys haven't been here before, or even if you have and you want to refresh, your Cinema Bias is a show that me and Alex do every week, every Tuesday at 8 p.m., where we sort of force one of us forces the other one, or sometimes a special guest, to watch a movie outside the other one's purview. So in this case, it's a movie that I love dearly. It's maybe one of the few holiday movies I can stand. It's 1980 somethings. Scrooged, great film, something that's never been seen by my lovely co-host here. It's Bill Murray. I grew up on this movie. So I'm really interested to see what you think. I do want to remind you guys, Streamlabs is open. So if you want to go to streamlabs.com/VideoDrew for all your donation needs, you can see we have a little tip thing here. You can have your little thing read aloud and it'll be super fun and awesome. Otherwise, we can just get right to it. Oh yeah, feel free to super chat, guys.
Please.
So you start the show by asking Alex, what is your bias? Why haven't you seen Scrooge before?
I do want to mention, going into this movie, I was not excited. I think it's been, after kind of discovering a lot of my personal biases through this show, I started to notice patterns when it comes to my movie biases, whether it be a certain genre or a certain decade or filmmaker, an actor, whatever it may be. And I kind of realized this year in particular, I really don't like holiday movies, but especially 80s holiday movies.
Yeah.
They make me uncomfortable. They're really mean. Dark. They're so mean. And Christmas Vacation, Christmas Story. I don't like it.
Yeah. I mean, that is something that we realized, is that Christmas movies are inherently like something about the makeup of them involves a lot of cruelty. I recently wrote the script for this Rotten Tomatoes show that I'm working on, The Ketchup. Go check that, guys. Check that out, guys. It's it was just about like the worst rated holiday movies, but all of them shared something in common. And I think that's something it shares in common with every holiday movie, which involves a level of like wanton violence, like cartoonish violence, like someone being like just a big jerk. I'm like, how is this what we express the holidays for? Like, how is this what the holidays have come to mean for us? Like, I want to contrast that with a movie that we just did for NerdChronic, the VideoChronic pop culture quiz. We just did Short Term 12, which is not a holiday movie, but it is a very kind movie. It's a very gentle movie. It's about kids living in a facility that's, for people with, without parents and troubled teenagers. And it's still like a beautiful, lovely movie. It's like Lakeith Stanfield's first film. Now that movie is like way more of a holiday movie than any of the holiday movies we've managed to check out this year.
I absolutely think you're on point. I do think that it is possible to have a holiday inspired movie without actually having the Hollywood, the Hollywood Christmas lore movie, without actually having the actual lore within the movie. Like, you could have, as long as you have the spirit and the message, inspiration in there, it is very possible to include it. But
I don't know. Maybe it's a thing because I'm Jewish. I love to bring that up, but maybe it's a thing because I'm Jewish. I just don't get the idea that like like, well, because like, and I'm about to bring it up because I've always found A Christmas Story to be a pretty like weirdly anti-Semitic story. Now I know it's not. I know that wasn't like Dickens' intention, but my read of it's always like, okay, so the guy wants to work through Christmas and loves money. Like, so what? Like, you know what? Like, let him be. Like, who's he hurting? Like, you know, let him go about his like Christianic like lifestyle. Like, who is that hurting? Why does he have to be visited by ghosts? Why is he going to be doomed because he's a moneylender? Like, all of that always struck me as a really like weirdly anti-Jewish read, but that's you know, my own bias coming into this. However, this movie was one of the few, this and Muppets Christmas Carol, so my two favorite Christmas movies. They both tell the story of A Christmas Carol, and they both tell them in really interesting ways that I feel like have like a meta like universe textual element. This one clearly about like television and how we consume media. And it's also just really funny. So I'm really excited to have you tell me the plot of this movie in 60 seconds. Now, I wanted to add a caveat to this, Alex, because it is the plot of A Christmas Carol, which is a story that we all know really well. I want to see if you can give me the plot, like outside, like the elements outside of the Christmas Carol. Like, you know, don't tell me that this guy is visited by 3 ghosts and then changes his life around. I want to hear more about, you know, what else is going on.
I thought you usually want me to simplify it where I don't go
into
details.
Today I don't want you to rely on the Christmas Carol narrative.
The thing is, it sounds like you don't want me to rely on the Christmas Carol narrative. Yeah. Okay, sure. All right, let's do this. All right. Hit me. All right. So it starts off with Frank Xavier Cross. He starts out as a nobody. He becomes a somebody. He is the youngest television executive president of some television company based in, I think, in New York City. I'm not entirely sure, but he ends up firing someone on Christmas Eve, surprise, and he also goes through a lot of situations where he's developing this TV show, the different adaptations of Scrooge, a much more classic version where it's like a period piece, and the other one's like more action adventure or whatever. Anyway, over the night where everything's being filmed, he ends up being visited by 3 different, you know, ghosts, obviously Christmas past, presents, and future, and they kind of incorporate, you know, how he's really like not only actively making people around him suffer, and it's just about him recovering from those situations and just him trying to be a better person before Christmas Eve.
I think that's pretty good. I'm saying you got this, Alex. She got this. That's easy to sum up. Hi, Jenny Lawson. Hey, guys. Thank you guys for joining us. I think that's pretty good. You know, I do want to mention a couple other things. That this, like I said earlier, this movie, the hook of this movie is that it's done entirely through the gaze of television media, and I would love to see this updated. You know, I'd love to see what this looks like in the digital age, like someone who's like a miserly Twitch streamer who twitches all through Christmas or something, you know. But like the idea of like that everything can be mapped out about the Scrooge story can be mapped out in the television landscape. It's a guy who just wants the ratings. That there's sort of like split tiny. There's a split sort of what's his name? Not Scrooge. The other guy. Cratchit. There's like a split Cratchit character. One half of Cratchit is, of course, Alfie Woodard, who is ageless. She is ageless because she looks the same age here as she does in like in this Captain America Civil War. Like, it's super weird. So she's in this. She's sort of like half of Bob Cratchit. The other half, of course, is Bobcat Goldthwait, who's here only sort of doing the Bobcat Goldthwait voice. So it's kind of hard to tell it's Bobcat Goldthwait as his assistant his employee that he fires on Christmas. We also have Nancy Allen in this movie. She is fantastic. Or no, Karen Allen. I always get them two confused. One was in Carrie, one was not in Carrie. I think it's Karen Allen, who I also used to confuse with Jessica Harper. She is the love interest in this guy's story. He's visited, his version of the 3 ghosts all have something to do with New York life, with modern day life, with the media. His past is a taxi driver. His present is like it's amazing Carol Kane, amazing Carol Kane character. And his future is a very, very scary, non-talking dude with a television for a face, which is very video.
And you see him for the first time as for the first time technically when he's in the elevator you know, being on the film set, and then the second time we see him, he's like becoming bigger and bigger through the different TVs, and then he reached out. That's such a cool scene. It really, really is.
Oh, it's really scary. Look, part of the thing of A Christmas Carol is always that the Ghost of Christmas Future has to be very scary, and it has to be very scary in the same way. It has to be this big, hulking, scary figure with like no face and like, you know, this big thing. I mean, I also love that this story has a meta Christmas narrative, which is that he is making this story. What's his name? Something Xavier Cross.
His name is Francis Xavier Cross. It was on his.
So Francis, you know, he's fighting with the guy from Gremlins 2. He's fighting with the Crump, like the Donald Trump guy from Gremlins 2. Who wants to take his job. We don't really see that much about whether this guy's a good guy or a bad guy, but we do know this guy wants to take his job and is like he's the West Coast bad guy. So he's like, kind of like a shady motherfucker. So he's trying to take Frank's job. Frank's really turned up about it. He's visited by his former employer, who is the old head of the network, who also weirdly like operates as the Fezziwig of this story, even though Fezziwig is not supposed to be the same guy as the Marley character. Whatever. But within this story, he's telling A Christmas Carol. Like that's the show that they're putting on Christmas Eve night. And he's making everyone work to do, and he's trying to staple little antlers to the place.
The title of actually it is Scrooge. that is the title of the programs technically, but yes, it is Christmas Carol. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, just like this movie is called Scrooged, because it is like getting screwed. It is a past tense verb. So I want to hear, Alex, like what were your thoughts upon initially watching this film?
Before watching this movie, I was not excited to watch it. Like I said, you know, because the set in the late 80s in particular, I'm really iffy on movies released in the 80s, especially when they're supposed to take on a darker tone like this. Even if it's supposed to be for comedy's sake. Let's face it, a lot of comedies, especially in the 80s, they do not age well. There's a lot of throwaway, racist, sexist, horrible jokes. And I feel like usually the 80s are like a lot of the comedies that age the worst are from this decade in particular. And I feel like that a lot of times that applies to including holiday movies. But holiday movies really kind of hold a special place in a lot of people's hearts, but I digress. Going back to it though, I do love Bill Murray, and I actively avoided this movie because I kept thinking I don't want to taint my vision of Bill Murray being amazing in everything I've seen him in. I love him in everything, including that weird zombie movie that came out like last year with Adam Driver.
Was he in Zombieland Double Tap, guys, or was he just in the regular zombie? I bet he was in Double Tapped.
No, it was okay. So he was.
Oh, you mean the
Zombieland?
Yeah, yes. Was he in that? I mean, it was in Jim Jarmusch movies, but I didn't know he was in that one.
I could have sworn he was, but maybe I'm remembering. Anyway, but I have this I kind of put him on a pedestal of actors that I love absolutely, and I feel like are not only ageless, but I feel like they can have a hard time doing anything wrong, just because not only in real life are they just genuinely known for being good people, but also they just make really funny movies without being asshats about it.
Yeah.
And so as far as I know, I haven't heard anything bad about him. I've only heard exclusively good things. And I feel like that's so intensely rare. So
his publicist must have like a thing just of being like, okay, here's the crazy thing you're going to go do. Like you hear all these stories about Bill Murray showing up at someone's dodgeball game, or like, you know, ending up as like someone's bartender and being like, no one will ever believe you. Like he just seems like such a lovable scamp. Like catching him is like catching a legendary Pokemon doing something. Like
there's an entire documentary about finding him in the most weirdest of places. Like he'll go to like a frat party and just walk in and do the dishes. The weirdest situations, and I love it. So
my funniest story, I mean, I think one of the funniest stories about Bill Murray is that he, for the longest time, and we found this out when we did Who Framed Roger Rabbit, is that he turned down the role, or he didn't get to the role of Valiant because he has a very weird idiosyncratic style about picking films, which he has everyone call in the same toll number and pitch him the movies. And like, that's how he picks what movie he wants to do. And it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter if you have an agent or if you're like, you know, if you're a part of the studio, you have to call in this number and leave him a message and tell him what your movie's about. and he somehow like didn't get the message for Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and therefore like missed out on playing Eddie Valiant in that film.
Does he regret not being in that movie now?
Yeah, he does. He does regret not being in that movie. Unlike Eddie Murphy, who just didn't understand what the concept of that film was. Never ending.
Eddie Murphy. I feel so bad for Eddie Murphy. It's kind of like when Will Smith didn't understand The Matrix. That's why he didn't put into it, but I'm actually glad he didn't get into it. I feel like it was a very, very different movie.
Yeah.
Or even Sean Connery when he passed up playing Gandalf in the LOTR trilogy.
That'd be like, don't get me with that nerd stuff.
Yeah, he's like, I don't understand. I don't get it. And because that was considered a huge missed opportunity on his part, that's why he did League of Extraordinary Gentlemen right after. And so it's
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
well, Bill Murray has rarely not done a movie that I've loved.
Exactly. So when I watching this movie, I was like, please let me like it. Please, please don't ruin this beautiful picture I have of Bill Murray in my head. You know.
So what were your immediate thoughts on seeing this film?
My immediate thoughts, it's funny. I think it's really, really solid, aside from one or two racist comments, but I also kind of mentioned those comments. I feel like it's the 80s. It's impossible to make a perfect film. There were throwaway racist comments, but whatever. It happens. But again, I mean,
I didn't really hear anything, especially because Alfie Woodard's playing his assistant.
Oh, I mean, it's not so much. It wasn't directed at her. It was the Chinese food thing. Thing is, okay. So it's okay. So the whole idea that Chinese people actually, the whole MSG conversation, don't include MSG in your food. That Chinese people cook cats and dogs in their food has a lot of racist roots, in particular, going back to World War I. And it's really, really horrible. And the thing is, I grew up in an Asian household, and I remember a lot of those comments being said to my grandma growing up. Yeah. And so it was something I not only I'm like, I was growing up, I was always just very aware of that conversation. But like when I heard it, I was like, well, and it doesn't happen anymore now. But
you think maybe it's something that like is because his character is supposed to be awful and like just sort of that kind of person that would make that kind of comment?
Well, I have to say, I don't think so, honestly. It was a very much a throwaway comment. And honestly, I do think that it felt very much like, because it was like the whole idea of eating Chinese food was actually a run-on joke that he says that he actually turned down eating Chinese food with that one girl that was hitting it on him during the Christmas party. And she gave him a picture of like her panties. And well, she was giving everyone pictures of her panties, but also he ended up he asked Karen Allen's character, what's her character's name? Claire, to end up going to Chinese food later. And it's actually mentioned for a third time. The Chinese food is brought up again towards later. So it was a conscious effort to bring it up for sure. So it feels like a very scripted moment, very deliberate moment.
Right. I think the deliberacy though is this is when these are his past, these are specific things in his past where he's actively being like a bad guy and he's making a lot of terrible comments at people. Like this is when he's, saying the homeless should, but I see your point. But anyway, what else did you think about, what else did you have thoughts on about this?
I felt like it was a low-key kinky movie.
Low-key kinky? Explain.
So I was watching this. And I was like, watching the second ghost. This chick. Okay, she is one horny AF witch. The entire time I was like, this is like someone like
she goes down in a bubble, dog.
You know what? No. Ghost. She's like, no, she's a horny ghost. Okay, and I'm really, you get it, ghost. You get it, ghost. Princess. I loved it. No saying there's no reason why dominatrixes can't look like that. Absolutely. If anything, even better. And, there's like entire moments where, because let's face it, a lot of powerful men, they prefer sometimes. And, you know, and she was like pretty much like forcing these like belly button blowies on his stomach and everything. He was conscious, and he was like actively being like, oh my gosh, no. And stuff like that. It just like pretty consistently throughout their whole thing. And it came off, and he even like later mentioned, it's like, oh, you know, I like that in a woman. He mentioned that she's like, oh, she fights back, or oh, she's sassy or something along those lines. When she ended up putting him into that like, not like sewer room area that he was kind of locked in. He ended up being locked in. He made a comment talking about how he kind of liked it. And so it was kind of a weird, and meanwhile, she's actively physically torturing him or physically making him uncomfortable the entire time. She's constantly like grabbing hold of him, like trying to slapping him around, bonking him over the head. And it just came off a little bit that way to me. Now, again, I'm seeing this for the first time, but I messaged the C2A fam, and I was like, hey, have you guys seen this? And all the guys responded the same way, saying if it was like pretty cool and everything, it was a great movie, all that good stuff. And I brought up her character. What do you think of that character? And in my girls chat, they all said the same thing, saying, yeah, that Carol Kane character is like super horny the entire time. And I was like, thank you. It's not just me. What?
I never read it as a sexual thing because their relationship is never made as a sexually explicit thing. I consider it more of just kind of the cartoon violence that exists in these sort of stories. That that this character is violent towards him, but like yes, he does make a couple comments like that are just sort of like, oh, I like that in a woman, or stop doing that, or it's sort of played again for laughs. We do get a lot of glimpses into Frank's sex life in his past relationship with Claire and the Karma Sutra and what they're into. He kisses somebody like on live TV before declaring his love for another woman. I mean, Frank's a kinky bitch. I think that he's what they call it, giving game and good. I forget what the things are.
He definitely likes to mess around.
Yeah, absolutely. But I never read her as particularly. I do think that she's one of the highlights of the film. I think Carol Kane is absolutely like the standout performance of this film because she's such a like she's like, if you guys have seen Kimmy Schmidt, if you guys have seen Addams Family Values, if you guys have seen a lot of movies from the 80s, 90s, and going on today, Carol Kane is like a comedy staple. She's always looked like that. She continues to look like that. She's just this immortal being, kind of like Alfie Woodard.
She's perfect. Watching this, I was like, because I saw the movie Three Musketeers, the 90, 93, 94 one with like Chris O'Donnell and Tim Curry, and I was like, oh my gosh, is she like a different version of Tim Curry? Because they are both iconic in their own ways. They do like a lot of indie movies, but they also do a lot of these like very specific characters, like fairy godmothers or like corrupt cardinals or these like really weird characters as well. But they do a lot of animation stuff and TV.
I believe the thing with Carol Kane, and this is something I noticed as a kid, was Carol Kane's deal is that she always played someone way older than she was. Like when I was a kid, she was in The Princess Bride, and it was her and Billy Crystal playing Miracle Maximus White.
That was her. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. In the Addams Family Values, she's playing like the grandmother. I mean, she's always playing these like ridiculously old crones. This is one of those few movies where you actually got to see Carol Kane's like not in her like mid 80s. So it's really funny to watch movies with Carol Kane now, or to watch like Kimmy Schmidt now and be like, yeah, Carol Kane's now she is older and she still looks like bomb. She still doesn't look as crazy as people made her look in the 90s or 80s with these movies.
Did you catch the Addams family? Did you catch the Addams Family joke?
No, I don't think Addams Family had come out yet. Oh yeah, wait, about Lurch? Oh no, yeah, what Lurch played.
They talked about exactly. And then I was like, wait, and then I kept thinking because he wasn't in Addams Family, I think, until like similarly 92, 93, I want to say, and it was kind of crazy to see that.
Sorry, she was only in the second Addams Family.
Yeah, it was kind of crazy to see that, and I was like, oh.
There's a lot of great cameos in there. You get the just shoot me lady playing the other fiance. I'm like could come up with their names, but I'm not going to. His brother's played by a character actor who you'll notice in a lot of things. Like I mentioned, Alfie Woodard's in this, but I think that's Buster Poindexter. Is that what the guy's name is? Who plays the taxi driver in the past? The Glenn's 2 dude. This movie's full of people that I don't know the name of, but I know they've been in other stuff. And Bobcat Goldthwait, who is like a big. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I did want to mention, say, if you bring up Danielle Ramirez's thing at the bottom where she says, "Did I get here in time for the horny ghost?" See, yes, Carol Kane is amazing. I first saw her in the show Taxi. Yes, bam.
Carol Kane from Taxi. And I was right. The Ghost of Christmas Past is the dude. I was like, this can't be his real name, so I went to double check it. It is Buster Poindexter. He was the member of the New York Dolls, like this big proto punk band in the 80s. He just went by the name Buster Poindexter. That's why he's kind of a famous dude to have in this movie. He is also fantastic. I love the idea that in Scrooge's backstory, and in this guy's backstory this time, that he was just raised on television. Television is like what saved him from his terrible, upbringing, that he just couldn't, that he like lived in this fantasy world, and then growing up, he just like wanted to be in part of television. I understand that. I love television. I think that that's a big part of the conversation. Let's see.
Yeah, I definitely think it's also interesting because, like you said earlier, this is a very meta movie. This is a movie that's intensely aware of what it is and what kind of movie it's making, while also with a lot of people within this world. It's kind of a joke that for people that work in TV, radio, or in film in general, you're to a certain extent kind of cynical about the world. At least from what I've been told, people have this kind of view of it, and where it's just coming down to the numbers sometimes. And because a lot of it is not so much about real life, it's more about the perception of real life, through TV and television, through these mediums.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I also think it's absolutely true that this movie, he says at the end, like, he has that line where he's like, I learned a great word from my Jewish friend, and that word is schmuck. And like, I was a real schmuck. And like, that is absolutely true. That's like what kind of gets to the heart of like my whole thing. And again, like, I'm not going to say that this movie didn't have a couple racist comments or like whatever, because again, my take watching any movie that's about a Christmas story is why these people hate Jewish people. Like, why is this anti-Jewish? Because like, and I think schmuck is a good word to describe somebody that's like that. He's just like wants to work through the holidays. He's an asshole to everybody. But like, in the original Christmas story, it's so much way worse because he's supposed to be like a money guy. And like, that was traditionally the terrible stereotype about Jewish people, and allowed Germany to really turn against them. And right before World War II was the idea that they were always the money lenders, when in fact that was a position that they were forced to take in society, like by many other people. And like, so it's one of these things, but I think that I really like this idea of a Christmas story being mapped out onto other landscapes, because I think it allows it to move away from that original idea that Scrooge is going to put people in the poorhouse, or he's like specifically somebody involved with like money lending or like, property. And he goes straight into just being, in this case, a TV executive with a big penchant towards being a jerk. I mean, we see this all the time. This is a Rupert Murdoch guy. This is a Ted Turner guy. This is a guy who's just looking at the numbers and the ratings and wants to sell the kind of publicity that an old woman will have a heart attack to while watching the commercial.
It's about getting those numbers up. That's what it's all about. And I do think that it's also really funny because there's the creation of these two different adaptations of the same story. Like, one involves like drug overdose and bombings and a terrorist attack, and versus which is like is also the same title, Scrooge, but the other version is like a period piece with dancers with half of their nipples out.
Well, it's always been just one story. It's just that they had two different commercials that they were running. One of them had nothing to do with the movie. They were always going to run the same live broadcast. It's not like they had two different broadcasts. It was one live broadcast, and then he he had two different ads that were running against it. One was like, come watch the Christmas Story. And one of them was like, you know, drug overdoses, terrorists, like all these things. And then it has nothing to do with Christmas Story. But he's just like, see, that's going to scare them. And then when an old woman has a heart attack, he's like, you can't buy those kind of ratings. Like, you can't buy that kind of publicity. It's a really great moment. It's a really great sort of, the way that Gremlins 2 is a really good satire on a certain kind of like developer in New York City at that time, who may or may not be currently president. Like this movie is a really good satire of like the TV industry and like how it was building up to be this, you know, 24-hour news cycle that we know of it today. Like it was all about, you know, shocking and scaring people into like being glued to your television 24/7.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a world that, especially when it comes to movies, we don't really see that many movies about this world. Like nowadays, we definitely do. We definitely have a lot more movies that are about the behind the scenes world of filmmaking and radio and things like that. We have, you know, Barton Fink, we had Frasier and all that good stuff. But especially in the 80s, there weren't all that much outside of like maybe a handful here and there that are very specific to that world. And which I actually really, really love. It's such a deliberate move. I think it's also a movie that when Richard Donner made this, it was very clear that it was made with love. Like there was such a conscious effort throughout to include these little jokes that people in the industry would recognize and have that much more appreciation for.
When I was growing up, I remember like there are a couple lines that always stood out to me in this movie, and one of them was always the idea of the VCR, the bath towel, which is you know, which is what he gets. It's what he decides what his people are going to get. Like he's going down his list of people, like if like they're going to get, and goes bath towel, VCR, and there's only like a couple executives who get VCRs, and then he goes across his own brother and he goes towel. And then she's like, he's like, put yourself down for a towel as well. And she's like, what about my bonus? And he's like, and a you know, and a face cloth or something. It's really, it's really good. I always thought that she was such a well done character that like using Alfie Woodard as the Bob Cratchit, as one of the two Bob Cratchit sort of split characters. And this was really good because, right, like she's his assistant. I always loved their version of Tiny Tim being her like son who's got some sort of, you know, emotional or mental issue and won't speak. He can speak, but he won't speak until the very end of this movie. I always thought that was like such a like great touch because it really does also speak to something that's a little bit more nuanced than just sort of like a kid with a you know, crutch. It's like, no, there's something like wrong with this kid and the mom's trying to figure it out, but she's always at work and there, you know, nothing physically is wrong, but he watched his dad being murdered and you know.
I absolutely agree to that. Like the thing is, when I watched it, I was a little confused on that because the kid is like 5 years old, and the line in the movie was, since he saw his father get killed 5 years ago, and I'm like, was he a baby or like? You're right.
I can't tell kids' ages that well.
No, he looked 5 or 6 years old max. Otherwise, he was very malnourished. He was very young.
It was a child that he picks up during the course of the film. So that is as tiny Tim. I also really growing up where it was where they would plug him in, where they had the kid, like the rest of her kids, like plugged him in, and he was like the tree. And she's like, don't plug him in. I mean, it's just, this movie is full of so many like delightful little moments that I have always like grown up thinking like, this is how I want my Christmas story being told, like in this amazing way with Bill Murray, in a way that I can find relatable, both like from his side and her, like, and the side of the audience that you're supposed to be on, that like, you know, you're not supposed to like Scrooge. But I feel like his Scrooge is the most likable Scrooge we're ever going to see. Like you're kind of like with him because it's Bill Murray and because he's funny and because the jokes he's making are as much jokes aside to the audience as they are to the people in the scene. Like he's making comments the way that Ryan Reynolds makes comments in movies. Like he's just saying these things because they're funny things to say, not because people in the scene are necessarily responding to them. But you know, like because it's Bill Murray, you want to hear all his jokes, even while he's being a terrible person.
All right. Hey, I'm going to bring up a picture real quickly of the Tiny Tim character real quickly, just to show how baby-faced and young he is. Because he's just so tiny. Oh, whoopsie daisy. If I can find it. Oh, yeah, this one. I think it's this one. Yeah. So this kid is not 8 or 9 years old. I'm sorry. I have cousins, I have nephews that are 5 years old. That kid looks younger. That's a young lad. That's a wee bairn. Okay. I don't know what you're talking about being 8 or 9 years old. No. But yeah, sorry. I just wanted to address that to the chat. Because
so was there any like what were some of the moments or scenes, or like, you know, what struck you in this movie?
The chemistry. Bill Murray, I've known he has really great chemistry with his fellow actors and everything. He naturally has like a really great flow with just about everyone that I've seen him in. But in particular, with this movie, I've never really seen him in a movie where he's romantically involved all that much, outside of perhaps Ghostbusters. But he's in this movie, there is some genuine connection, very genuine sexual tension, and I'm really into it. I was like, I never thought I would see a little sexy Bill Murray, but I was so here for it.
It's very sexy. Between this and Groundhog Day, I spent a lot of my childhood being like, that's what old man, like adult men are like that's how they are. And I think that is sort of problematic because he was always playing such jerks during this period of time, like the Groundhog Day, this movie, that I grew up like thinking like, when a guy treats you like this, that means he's being like funny and clever, and not like this guy is just constantly like Phil Connors and Frank Cross are not like role models for like what you should look for in boyfriends, ladies. Like they just aren't. They're people who have to go through traumatic, supernatural, existentially bereft ordeals in order to just be like, go back to the baseline human state that most of us operate on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I never thought of him as a character that I would be like, man, this character's like really hot. But this, and you're right, Groundhog Day, I was like, ugh.
Phil Connors?
You're hot. I'm into this a lot more than I thought. Mm-hmm. So I was really excited, not to mention Karen Allen. I think she is, I was watching this, I was reminded how not only how gorgeous she is, but how
so beautiful
and really adorable and fresh. She reminded me a lot of early Meg Ryan, honestly. And I'm surprised Karen Allen isn't so much a thing all that much anymore.
It was her, and it was Jessica Harper, who was the lead in Suspiria, and she was in a lot of musicals in the 80s, like 80s and 90s, like Phantom of the Paradise, or 70s, I think, maybe Phantom of the Paradise, which is one of my favorites, and follow-up to Rocky Horror Picture Show that no one knows about, Shock Treatment. She's also just a very fresh-faced looking person who looks a lot like Karen Allen. I think both of them are gorgeous women, and you're right, I grew up thinking, like, where are they? Like, you know, Marion from Indiana Jones, I was like, where is she in movies? But I feel like maybe...
Gorgeous.
Yeah. That, you know, she was like one of the highlights of Crystal Skulls, quite honestly. And you're like, she aged wonderfully. Why can't we like have her in movies the way we have Harrison Ford in movies? Like she is such a delight in this film. She plays someone who I really like this character going back and being a little bit older and looking at her, because she's somebody who is very clearly like, even though she's portrayed as sort of a saint, she's very clearly like not a stick in the mud. She's not like a goody two shoes. She like thinks Frank is funny. Like she's willing to like go with him like to a certain extent, but she's just like, she draws a line in the sand in terms of like, you know, missing Christmas, or, you know, him like talking down to the homeless people at the place where she works. That's like where she really lets him like dig his own grave and then lets him storm off. She doesn't do a lot of the, you know, laying down ultimatums or you have to be polite or, you know, she's not played off like, you know, to take, for example, in the Christmas Carol, when Love Is Gone chick, when she, you know, even though she's not given that song in the movie, she, you know, she's the one to call off the engagement. You get the sense in this movie that he and his work and his lack of paying attention to her really was the thing that killed the relationship, not her laying down an ultimatum about, you know, you have to pay more attention to me or else.
Exactly. I 100% agree. not only that, like I said, when I feel like they have a really great connection and chemistry overall throughout it, even their fights feel like very genuine fights. I feel like those are conversations that almost everyone has had in relationships where you're trying to be like, hey, we schedule this family dinner, or we said we would do this together, or it's like, and it ends up being conversation where like, well, I've been working on this project for however long, my boss wants me to reschedule, I don't know what to tell you, this is out of my control. And meanwhile, these are conversations people have in real relationships all the time.
Constantly. Yeah. I remember in my last relationship, this was like a constant thing. It was less about like, if we're going to a work thing versus like a social thing. And it was more just about scheduling. Like she makes this comment about like, he makes a comment like, well, my boss invited me out. He doesn't make schedules like a month out. And like, that used to be a big thing in my marriage. I hated planning. I liked doing things like impromptu and like when I felt like it and spontaneously. And sometimes my ex would have to remind me, well, we've had these plans for a month. And I would just be like, yeah, but something else has come up and it's a lot more exciting and it's a lot more, there's a big opportunity here and we should go do this thing instead. And he was a big proponent of like, if you schedule something, you have to keep to that. And so I got real wary about like ever agreeing to do something more than like a minute out, because I didn't want to be locked into something in case something better came along.
That's 100%. So, hey girl. I definitely 100% agree. It's, I feel like everyone's done that, to some extent, whether it be for personal reasons or if we're prioritizing personal things or work things. We're human, and, it's hard not to do that sometimes. Again, it just kind of makes it more realistic that these conversations, those relationships feel more genuine. The script overall feels very genuine. And I feel like I've had this, I feel like I've had the conversation before where, well, not me personally, but I feel like I've been in similar situations before where I've not only said this exact line, but even some of the funnier lines, which are, so, well, one of my favorite quotes in the movie is, I feel like it's one of the standalone quotes where I feel like I actually, out of nowhere, I did bust a gut, where it says, "That bitch hit me with a toaster." I was like, why am I laughing so hard? And it was with the ghost of Christmas Present, and she ended up hitting him with the toaster. It was really, really funny when they were at his brother's house. It was really great. Now, I think that now, direction-wise, actually, I think this is actually one of the really great scenes that really kind of showed if Karen Allen's character went in the direction, took his advice, and did what he suggested, and be like, hey, abandon these people, save yourself. You're not saving anyone by doing this. You're just like putting everyone else in front of you, essentially. And in that case, she loses a lot of the color, a lot of the life, that's really made her special and beautiful compared to like her usual self, versus this way where it's very Tim Burton-ish.
Everything in the future has this very like black and white color palette. It looks like, we go from like a super saturated world to like something where everything is washed out. It used to terrify me as a child with his death scene, because I never really got that either. That the end of the Christmas Carol, the scariest thing that's supposed to change Scrooge's mind is when he sees his own tombstone, and like that's the one thing that's not going to change no matter how good of a person you are. You're still going to die. You're still going to have a headstone. But the way they do it in this movie, with him being cremated and like no one being around for his cremation except his brother and his brother's wife, and like no one else showing up, and it's in this big austere, like, just sort of like bloodless hall, and he's like, he's clawing at the casket like as it's going into the fire, and he's going, I don't want to die, I want to live, and suddenly he's inside the casket and he's beating on the casket, and he's going, I want to live. That really resonated with me when I was a kid, and it was terrifying. And I was like, what if you get stuck in a casket and you're sent to crematorium and like you're not dead yet? It put the fear of God in me. And like the point of it isn't that he's not going to die one day. It's that like that moment is supposed to give him the fear of God, that like he has more to do on this earth, and that he's not dying by being surrounded by loved ones and having lived a good life. He's dying all alone with like no one really to care for him or like, shed a tear other than his brother.
Yeah, absolutely agree. It definitely brings up this idea that if it is a little frustrating, this kind of creates this idea that if you don't live a much more traditional life with you're in a marriage with a partner, or at a conventional situation with kids and families surrounding you, it kind of makes it seem like you're going to die a horrible, lonely life. That kind of situation, which is really, really unfortunate, because you can obviously live a very full, wonderful, amazing life not having a partner or having kids. So that's kind of frustrating.
Right. I think it's not about that. It's the difference between his life. At the end of his life, she would be surrounded by the people who loved her at the homeless shelter. She would be surrounded by family. She would have somebody speaking at her funeral. It's more that he would die with no one left to even mourn for him being dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely that, or have people would have very little positive memory. I think that's a very genuine fear for a lot of people. Not only death itself, but how people will remember you. What's your legacy after death? How are people going to remember you, your work,
Hamilton.
Whatever the situation? It's huge. It's absolutely huge. And I feel like, especially in this movie, it's not so much played out my legacy. What's my legacy after I die? It's more like, how will just my family remember me? Just these closer people remember me, which is a very human thought.
Yeah, I mean, also, I think it just also comes down to to just take a step back. I think that my initial read as a child was not an incorrect read. It is literally someone who is scared because they are trapped in their own coffin and they are being fed to the flames. That in itself is terrifying, and that really does confront the idea of a Christmas Story, which is no matter what, he's going to die. That's going to happen. But maybe he doesn't have to be scared of the flames of hell, and maybe he doesn't have to be, because that's what that's sort of the ending of it, is it's not too late. You can repent. It's it's always this idea of repenting and changing your ways, as if hell itself, and not, the idea of your loved ones falling away from you or the suffering of some other people, is truly the thing that needs to be hammered home at the end of your journey. It's not that you've caused people to suffer. It's not all the things you did wrong in your life. It's that if you don't fix it, you're going to go to hell specifically, or be covered in chains. And that's just such a weird little note for a story that's otherwise about how you should be helping and not thinking about yourself and not thinking about your own where you're going to go, but thinking about helping out your fellow man. And look at Bob Cratchit's son, and look at all this love and other stuff around you in the world that you're not participating in. It becomes this very Christian story. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, so another thing that kind of surprised me, because I don't really understand why, is that Tiny Tim, essentially, I don't understand why he'd be put in mental institution. They kind of make it seem like he'd be put into a padded room, which that kind of imagery I associate with a mental institution. But I don't understand why he would be put in a mental institution, because he doesn't.
I think that he's whatever he has, and I don't think they made it explicit, which I think is probably the right thing to do, is that he is suffering from some sort of on the spectrum autism, because he's smart enough to talk, but he chooses not to talk. He's in some way become autistic from a trauma, which I don't think is something that could happen. But again, they don't make it explicit, but it is just something that he doesn't. He's choosing not to speak, and he has mental issues beyond that we might not be aware of. So he might become violent, he might enact something out in another way, but we just don't know what it is. It's more, again, it's just a vision. It's the idea that he would fall through the cracks of a system because he couldn't even get to the doctors, because his mother couldn't afford the right therapy fund.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. That definitely makes a lot more sense to me. And not to mention, like it was kind of mentioned where Francis, he wouldn't let his assistant leave to go to her doctor's appointment that she made 2 months prior. So little things like that, which is really unfortunate. I do think that it also kind of raises the question of what is real and what is not real. Because there's entire scenes in this which make it feel incredibly real. With the shooter that are obviously the shooter coming in and shooting him in his office, obviously, and taking over the telecom room when they're recording. But when they're in the restaurant where he sees the server on fire, obviously in his head. So it's kind of a weird, interesting mix of constantly asking yourself which which of these lessons were kind of is actually real with ghosts and everything, and that kind of imagery is real, but which ones aren't.
Yeah, I mean, I think it, like, you know, again, going towards, if we're going towards the traditional Christmas story, Christmas Carol beats, which the story really like hews very closely to, it's always the moment where he discovers Tiny Tim in the present, where he discovers that Tiny Tim like exists. That sort of begins the evolution of Scrooge changing. He's like, oh well, you know, his heart just sort of like breaks when he sees Tiny Tim, because he sees a sort of reflection of who he used to be, I think, as a child. You know, this sort of hopeful, like, you know, sort of overlooked, you know, small kid who's, you know, not getting the care that is necessary. So like that's sort of where his mind's at. I think, you know, it always needs that big, you know, just narratively, you want the story to end with something big, like a death. Like he has to change his ways. I'm just saying, personally, it's always struck me as like a little weird that the one thing that he cannot change is that he will inevitably die, be cremated, be worm food, have a funeral. Like that's just going to happen. That can't be the thing that changes his mind about being an asshole, because even if you're the world's nicest person, you're still going to die. But I get how narratively it's like the important thing. But I think, yeah, Ryan has a point, which is it's the 1-2 punch, 1-2-3 punch of it's seeing that the Tiny Tim characters in a mental institution, looking to see how he changed his ex for the worse, and then seeing his own cremated self. I mean, at the end of the day, he might decide to get buried or, like, you know, not be cremated because of this vision. I'm sure that's very traumatizing, but it will not change the fact that he will one day be dead.
Yeah. I feel like everyone has to come to that reality that obviously we all are going to die at some point. I feel like that's definitely one of the biggest question marks of life, obviously. Not only when, but how we're going to die, obviously. But that's also a question at the same time, we also don't really want answered because if we find out the answer, then our life, let's say, you know, we find out we die at some point in a plane crash or something along those lines. Hypothetically, you could decide for the rest of your life, I'm never getting into a plane crash ever again, or whatever it may be.
We don't need to get into the final destination of it all. But
that's very true. It's a very scary concept to get into. But I do think that, you know, it's the visuals of this movie are pretty spectacular as well. I feel like we haven't really touched on the visuals all that much.
Yeah, I mean,
terrifying.
Yeah, they're very good. It's the whole thing is done in this sort of grainy looking, very realistic looking thing until you get to that end. That's the Ghost of Christmas Future. I mean, it's all very dirty. It's very dingy. It's very New York in the 80s. Like it's just grimy. Like you can feel like it's like these weird muted color palettes. Even though there's like scenes that take place during the day. Like most of it seems like it's taking place in like a boxed room with like no windows, and like, you know, they're on a soundstage for a lot of it. When there is light, it's like grainy and it's filtered. I do like NerdChronic's idea that Scrooge is like a dog who doesn't comprehend what death is, and therefore like Tiny Tim's death is a wake-up call, and he doesn't understand that his tombstone is the one immutable fact. I do think that works because, you know, the idea is that maybe Scrooge didn't have a soul before this, or that his soul has somehow gotten lost, or his soul somehow damned, and therefore he's never been able to, like, without a soul, you can't contemplate the idea that you're going to die because you have no concept of something existing after death. So that works. I feel like that read works. But again, like, you know, taken with a grain of salt, the flames in this movie are both metaphorical and literal flames that he does not want to burn alive. And that moment is maybe that part of that dream where you wake up just because it's so scary that you're waking up.
It's such a genuinely fearful moment, like a genuinely scary moment. I feel like you kind of get that moment within any Christmas Carol Scrooge movie. At any point, there's always like one genuinely horrifying moment where he goes to his, you know, deathbed or whatever the situation is. And that one is just terrifying.
It's absolutely terrifying. It's the only one, because it's the only one that involves actually being able to see beyond his tombstone. It's usually just you see his grave and you're like, and he's like, oh shit, I die. And you're like, yeah, dude, like that's not even like a ghost thing. That's just like, guess what? But like, you know, it must be terrifying to see your own tombstone and the idea that no one's around for your funeral. You want your funeral, like you want like your wedding or some other big events of your life, to be surrounded by like loved ones who are all like saying the best things about you, to be like to have a funeral, to be dead, and to be like alone is terrible, and to be confronted with one's mortality is at any point terrifying. Like, I'm sure we've all had to confront mortality many times this year, and looking it in the face is not something we try to do on an everyday basis.
Oh, I'm just gonna hold that. I forgot my charger. I'm gonna be right back, but I keep talking. I can still hear you.
Yeah, that is terrifying. Yeah, I mean, I think it's more the idea that he feels like he has more to live for. It's not that he wasn't scared of death before. It's not like the being in the flames changed him, or like irreparably changed him. I think it was everything else up until that point, especially everything. Because, usually in the story and in this movie, by the time Christmas Present is done, he's good. Like, he says he's good. Like, he doesn't need to see anymore. He's ready to change. He's ready to give Claire the raise. He's ready to, like, change his ways. But I think it's something about seeing into the future and seeing what could happen should he then lapse again or forget again about his goodwill. You have to have that fear of, you have to have that fear, that mortal fear, in order to be a good person, which struck me as weird. It always strikes me as weird. Just stick with, like, the president when he agrees, like, without having to be coerced, that, like, he should be a better person.
Right. I'm really kind of curious that, I mean, let's face it, a lot of us have had these situations where we for example, it's the new year. A lot of us try to go through new diets, new exercise regimens. We try to become a better, or quote unquote more improved version of ourselves, sometimes in a very short amount at the beginning of the year, or around our birthdays or the summer, whatever it may be. And let's face it, it doesn't, 9 times out of 10, it doesn't hold true. And I'm basing this off my own experiences, or, just like a lot of people that I know in general that have gone through this. And I really kind of wonder if Scrooge, regardless of how intense this lone experience is, I wonder if he eventually goes back to his old ways and he's like, F it.
Great question. If we got like a follow-up to Scrooge, like, would he? And I think the idea is, like, yes, if we had just stuck with the Ghost of Christmas Present, he might have lapsed, because it's not enough to just see that, like, other people are suffering and to be like, oh yeah, like, I'm remote. Because that's kind of the speech he gives at the end sort of touches on that, when he says, you don't want to be one of these people who just say Christmas is once a year. And I think that's what Christmas Present is. It's very much like, look at how great Christmas is, which is fine. Like, that's a great way to be like, because the whole story is about him not appreciating Christmas. That forgets that there's 364 other days of the year where Scrooge is an asshole. And I think that's what Christmas Future is for, is to, like, make sure that those other days, that it's not Christmas, that you're not filled with goodwill towards men, necessarily just because you have to, cultural holiday.
Also, I kind of feel bad because was he considered bad? This guy, the previous president of the company? Like, he died while golfing.
They combine his character with Fezziwig's character, which is like the guy who's always having the big party in the past. And that guy is supposed to truly understand Christmas, not be like, this guy's supposed to be like what Scrooge could have been. That's supposed to be his former partner, Jacob Marley. But in this movie, it's his boss, who is like a philanderer and, doesn't spend time with his wife and goes around hooking up with like office girls. Which is weirdly not how we see Scrooge behaving. Like, that's not how Bill Murray behaves. He's not a philanderer. The mistakes that this guy made are not the mistakes that Scrooge made, that Cross makes. But we get the gist of what they're trying to do there, I think. And I think it works to like in that situation, combine it into one character. I also want to say I loved the head of the network. Having been with someone who is like involved in network TV for several years, like it's really funny. Like, the president of the network is just like this guy who's so out of touch, whose one contribution to like the conversation is add more like distraction things for kittens, so like cats can be like our major viewership. Like, that's that kind of ridiculous statement that, like, people come in like, we were like, I know how to boost the ratings, like, make it more entertaining for cats, because cats make up 10% of our viewership, and like boost the cat ratings. I mean, it's ludicrous, but I mean,
children.
But that thing, by the way, speaking of cat ratings, look what's going on over here. That thing came to be, however, like, if you go to Prime Video, there's something called, I forget what it's called. It's called Doggy something. And it's basically just television you put on for your dog that makes it look like there's other dogs around. You just babysits the dog by just like making it seem like other dogs are on the screen. it exists now. So like the most ludicrous thing in Scrooge is now absolutely 100% a thing that exists in real life.
There's something for everything. I mean, apparently one of the most profitable YouTube channels of all time is this one random child that is opening presents, or just not so much presents, just stuff in YouTube videos. Some random kid in Brazil, and it's so weird.
Yeah, it's presents. Like,
it's so weird.
On the internet. It's basically an unboxing.
Yeah, it's something for everyone. Yeah, I do think. Okay, overall, some of my big takeaways in this is that this movie is incredibly heartfelt. Outside of the throwaway thing that I mentioned earlier, I feel like it ages very well. I think it's also a very much a movie that I'm excited to rewatch come next year. And I feel like this is not a family movie. I feel like this is an adult movie more than anything.
Because there's so much. I grew up watching this movie. I grew up watching this movie, but I think it is a more adult telling. It's sort of like, it's almost like the movie that he's pitching within the movie. A Guy Pearce version of A Christmas Story that was all like gritty and involved like people shitting in alleyways and like was like this hardcore gritty version of Scrooge. I feel like this is like the second, this is an adult story of Scrooge. I just grew up in a very lax household that lets you watch weird things like this.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I mean, when I say it's not made for kids, I'm not gonna, like, hypothetically, I wouldn't show this to my 7-year-old nephew. I'm like, that would not happen. However, I would show it to my 12-13-year-old cousin that is watching R-rated movies and dramas, like really heavy-handed dramas for the first time. So that's what I mean, just because a lot of the jokes and themes and everything would really go over their head, but yeah, with this movie, I'll show it towards like, it's not like young family, but yeah.
I found it. Guess what I found? Oh, sorry. Let me put it up. I found it. Guess what? I found. Guess what I found?
What did you find?
I found what really exists now. Doggy TV, reality TV for dogs. You're guilty about leaving your dog home with nothing to do. Does your dog or dogs have anxiety when you leave and take something from your furniture? Whoops.
Animals.
No, I do not.
Animals
wow, they're
don't
really
want
making
no.
Sorry, let me refresh.
Okay. So I do want to point out, even when I'm not actively watching TV, I do put stuff from YouTube on the screen. Personally, like I'm a subscriber to like 10 or 15 YouTube channels where it's like made specifically, like it's ambient music would be like 12 hours of rain sounds. Or lightning sounds. And it would, because I love the sound of it. I find it incredibly soothing and relaxing. So if I'm just like cleaning stuff around the house.
Okay, I don't want to get so distracted, but I'm very obsessed with looking at the. I am very obsessed with looking at the reviews for this doggy reality TV.
Oh my god!
This is your normal reality TV series. This is this is just so great. My dog loves to watch dogs on TV. He gives this video 5 stars. You don't know what your dog does. My dog loved this. My dog constantly gets anxiety. My dog loved this. Yeah, people love this stuff. Seems like a low production film. Wonderful. Wait, 1 star. Look at this, Scrooge. I love dogs, but this is pointless and stupid. Does not serve a purpose even for dogs. I mean, you don't know. Anyway, this is a thing that exists in reality. Thank you, Scrooge, for making this real.
I do think I would be really curious to see how I would want to be curious to like put it on the screen and see if my pets actually react to it or not. Because sometimes my cats in particular, I have 2 cats, not dogs, but I do catch them like watching movies along with me personally. Like,
I mean, they'll do whatever. They're animals.
Yesterday, you bet your buttocks. They totally are watching actively with me, but I don't know if they would be into watching this.
I don't know if dogs can tell if there are other dogs on screen. I think if you just play a video of dogs barking, even if they're off screen, your dog will react as if there's other dogs in the room. Yeah. They just need to make the noises of dogs. I don't think the dog tracks the thing that's happening on screen as other doggies. Yeah. Like cats maybe because they get real weird about seeing their reflections and stuff, but dogs just need to hear dog noises and then they're good.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. They're like, oh, movement.
Yeah. Walked away for a minute. I'm saying what I was saying was, in real life, there is a real version of the thing that the guy is pitching in A Christmas Story, which is there is something called, it doesn't exist anymore. Like we can't get it in this region. It was called Doggy TV, I think. And it was this crazy ass program.
Really Animal Planet. Let's be honest.
Doggy TV, reality TV, guilty about leaving your dog at home with nothing to do. Does your dog have anxiety when you leave or take out the furniture? Here's the answer: dog TV. Just turn on the video and leave your dogs with something that is interesting to them. For 2 hours, your dog will enjoy watching other dogs playing, barking, and learning basic commands while you are away. Yeah, 3.5 stars. There's one guy just being like, "This isn't good for dogs." Yeah.
You know what?
Anyway,
I'm excited. I'm pretty curious overall. And I just want to remind you guys, if you have any questions, comments, we also really want to know your thoughts regarding this movie. So if you have any, please let us know in a Super Chat or Streamlab. We would really appreciate it in order to help keep Cinema Bias going. We're trying really hard to make Cinema Bias fun and interactive and everything. As awesome it is for us, we also want it to be just as much for you guys as well. So we would love anything.
Now, Alex, let me ask you. Well, yeah, but by the way, let me piggyback off of that. I cannot talk tonight. And please hit that like and subscribe button. I always forget to say that for more of this awesome content. We do shows all the time here. Alex, did you notice who did the score for this movie? Because as a kid, I really liked the music for this film. I thought it was really creepy.
Okay. The moment I heard the music playing, for a split second, I was like, that's Danny Elfman, isn't it? I looked it up and I was like, score, go me.
I mean, the score is literally the most Danny Elfman you can possibly imagine. It's these little children, these creepy listening little kids going da 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 da. It's like halfway between the Batman song and like
I know. I was like, is this
every single Danny Elfman song ever. So good though. It's also halfway between the Gremlins theme. Like it sounds kind of like Gremlinish. Like I said, this movie features Gremlin 2's own dude. Actor whose name I'm not going to remember, but I think like
$6 Million Man.
No, not the $6 Million Man. The guy who plays the guy coming in to like fix the network, like his rival is the same guy who plays the developer in Gremlins 2.
He's in Batman Returns with Poison Ivy and everything, where he's like the scientist, where he's like, ugh, and she's like, and my lips are poison, and she makes
maybe I don't remember who plays the scientist in Batman. He's like a very charming, very handsome looking dude. His rival, so not the Bob Cratchit, which is Bobcat. Sorry,
just
John Glover from Blade. Yeah, there we go, John Glover.
Yeah, he did play Lionel Luthor.
Guys, good job, comment sections. So Ryan's saying he learned that Bill turned down the lead roles in Big and Rain Man to be in this film. Absolutely, as he should have. And let me add, as he was probably pitched on both those films, he was pitched all 3 films again the same way, which is someone had to call up his like toll-free number and just pitch him the movie. And then he heard the plot of Rain Man, he heard the plot of Big, and then he heard the plot of this movie, and he's like, I'm gonna go with this film. It was amazing. Yes. He also played the dad. Yes, that's what I know him from. He's also the dad in Shazam. I hadn't seen him in years. I assumed that he was no longer with us. But like, yeah, he was the dad in Shazam.
He is Daddy Savannah from Shazam, and he plays like an emotionally abusive, father.
He just kind of looks like a jerk. He looks like such like a smarmy jerk that we had a lot of in the 80s.
Well, that's like watching this movie, I kept waiting for the ball to drop on his character where we find out he is like low-key an asshole, and we just haven't found out yet. But he's supposed to be, I guess, like a good guy because everyone is like really loving him. Everyone's like, we
get one line. Where I agree with you. It's kind of like it's kind of like his role in Gremlins 2, where he's supposed to be the bad guy and then sort of reveal that he's not like the worst guy. Like he's willing to do the good thing. This movie is like a little bit more like he gets one line where when he'd want to call him Phil Connors when our main character takes the camera during the live event and catches the coin and gets on camera, and they're like, it's him, and he looks blah, 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 blah. And he goes, he's finished. Like, he's like happy to himself because he's like, yeah, like he secretly has wanted to take over his job. And that's why like him going into the studio, like, you know, and Bobcat Goldthwait coming and taking everyone hostage and keeping the camera rolling on him was like kind of a big deal. He ends up getting hooked up with the census lady, the really horny, not census, censor lady, like the standards and practices lady that they have, trying to make sure that there's no nipples in the dancers. She sees, I want to call him Phil. She sees Bill Murray kissing a chick on camera and then decides that she's going to go try to molest a tied up, bound man. That's the weirdest, horniest scene in the movie, I think. Like, that's just such a weird beat. Why would you do that? Why is that where you go?
It's like, it's really awkward. Yeah, it's funky.
Was he really Siler's dad? I don't think he was Siler's dad. I, for some reason, thought he was dead. Maybe because like he seems like he should have been more stuff. Like he could have been playing a jerk all this time, and we just cut him off at the leg there.
He's definitely one of those character actors that's like, oh, that one guy. You've been.
Yeah, I mean, I literally didn't know he had a name. I just called him a Gremlins 2 Scrooge guy. And in my mind, as a child, that means those two movies took place in the same universe, and that was the same guy. So when I was a kid, because both those movies are very meta, and both those movies involve people like turning to the camera and talking directly to you, the viewer, and like, you know, both those movies have that sort of metatextual element. So as a kid, I just assumed that that character was the same dude who left the television business and then went like down the street in New York, because in my mind, like New York was like 1 block long, and like founded the building from Gremlins 2 and just decided to go into like real estate development. Because if you remember, in Gremlins 2, he also owns a television network.
You know what? Low key, it just might. I don't know.
Same guy.
Yeah, it just might.
Yeah, and again, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I do want to ask, you know, because I mentioned how I feel about this movie holding up. I kind of want to ask you, and I know I kind of already feel like I know the answer, but how does this movie hold up to you, Drew?
This movie, I know that we talked a little bit about how Carol Kane's a little bit of a sadist in this film. Surprisingly non-violent, non-cruel Christmas movie. Like, this movie really is truly about like the spirit of Christmas. It doesn't have
super kinky movie.
It's got some kink to it. I won't deny, because when I think back on it, like the standards and practice lady, like jumping on a dude who's tied up and bound, just being like, oh, because I saw this dude kissing on TV, I have to like go like molest a guy who does not consent to my advances. And that's funny because I'm the standards and practices lady. That's weird. That's a weird beat, but I get it. It's like cartoony. It's like the 80s, whatever. But I really,
and I quote, you know, I like the rough stuff.
I mean,
that's a line.
Says. The Carol Kane, everything between Carol Kane and Bill Murray is like laden with innuendo. I think less about like the sexual dynamic between him and a ghost, and more just about like them having funny dialogue and like having a funny relationship, her being a woman who's violent and like dressed like Glinda and being like super cute and like funny and like, you know, Carol Kane weird, but then also being extremely physically violent to make him do stuff, to coerce him.
Everything against what he associates with female behavior and everything, especially within his field. Yeah.
I also really like, I think that this movie is done just like perfectly. You know, it's paced perfectly. The Christmas past and Christmas future, like being right next to each other. You can't have a break. Like that's the area where you can't have a break, is between present and future, because if you stop after present and he's allowed to go back to his life, then you'd see him being a nice person and changing his ways, and you wouldn't need to have a future. So those things need to be like Christmas present needs to like back off the moment the Christmas future shows up. And this movie, the way that they handle that is him having like a nervous breakdown right after present, because he's like so paranoid. And he knows that he's going to be visited by the third ghost. So he's like worried that it's like everybody, you know, he thinks it's the guy in the elevator. It's like really well done. Just like how paranoid this character is about his, like, you know, somebody trying to sabotage him.
I'll tell you something that does not age well though, the makeup. That makeup. I'm sorry, but someone made that the makeup. It's, oh my gosh, it's so caked.
You know what I noticed in this movie? Bill Murray has so many fucking fillings, because there's at one point where we didn't talk about Bobcat Goldthwait, but another great part of this film, because Bobcat Goldthwait was this comedian in the 80s who had this really funny voice. He talked really I can't do a good Bobcat Goldthwait. He had like sort of vocal fry before it was cool. and like he talked really high pitched, but like he had that really gravelly like wah, wah, wah. And in this movie, he's only kind of half doing it. So like he wasn't dressed up like in his like zany way. So you kind of had to know that was Bobcat Gold. It would be like Pee Wee Herman and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Like you can tell that's Paul Rubens, but only kind of after someone points it out because he's not doing his usual bit. He's not dressed like the character you usually know him from. And that's sort of like what Bobcat Goldthwait's doing in this film. And I think it's like to great effect. So yeah, so that's Bobcat Goldthwait, clean shaven, not looking. He's usually like, he's usually really wild hair and crazy looking. So in this movie, he's only kind of half doing that weird voice thing that he can do. So it's almost like he's doing like this undercover thing. But then by the end where he's got the shotgun and, he puts it in Bill Murray's mouth and Bill Murray's mouth gets so big. And you see that like every single one of his teeth has just like a giant black spot where he has had a filling. I was like, that's super creepy. It's just like his whole mouth is metal.
It's so 80s.
Yeah, I would say, Johnny Kara's question. Right today they had I cannot talk tonight, on Cocktails and Casting with Sabrina and Ben Goddard. They did a version of Scrooge. They recast Scrooge, and I didn't get to see all of it, but I did see that Sabrina's pick. I love Sabrina's pick for who should play Scrooge. So Ben's pick was Jason Bateman, which is fine.
Great pick.
He's fine. He's both likable, but he's also, if you've seen The Gift, he's also can be a jerk. Like you can play Jason Bateman both ways. Go ahead. Yeah, you think that you like that? Her choice, I really loved, was Charlize Theron for Scrooge.
Yo! I was actually going to go in a very similar route. Okay.
Like just because Charlize Theron specific, not like just a woman as Scrooge, but specifically Charlize Theron as Scrooge.
I just want to see her in more comedic roles in general. Like that's
she's also a very physical actor. Like I think like the idea
she's so great with physical comedy, and she's never put in those roles, which hurts my heart. Because she's so fantastic.
Oh. But she's also like, she can play that ball buster stereotype of like someone who's very cold and someone who does like, and so I think Sabrina's counterpart was for her was Samara Wiley. I think her name's Samara Wiley. That's how I pronounce it. From Orange is the New Black, who played Poussey in Orange is the New Black.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, and it's just something that's you don't even need to discuss is that Scrooge is just sort of like lesbian. And I was like, yeah, that is totally believable. I mean, that is not only believable, but that works as something you don't even need to like be like have a big red flag pointing at it or a big red arrow being like, this is a gay story. It just is what it is, and it works for that character who's who's spent a lot of their life being alone and like loveless and not trying to make relationships a major part of their life. Of course, like their sexuality wouldn't be either. Like I just really like that read of it.
Okay. Can I give you my 2 suggestions?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I have 2 very different approaches. One a much more traditional version, and the other isn't as traditional.
Yes, we're doing this. Sorry, Ben. Sorry, Sabrina. We're co-opting your idea.
Okay. We're not going to go into the whole roading thing, but we're having fun here. One is Eugene Levy. Because I don't think that man can do wrong.
You mean Dan Levy? You mean his son? Because his son would be great in it.
No, that too, absolutely. But I haven't seen him in that much outside of the TV show, and so I think.
But that he can be a jerk. Like I know I picked him for Planes, Trains, and Automobile recasting, but that he can do that like withering, bitchy thing.
Yeah, I just haven't seen Dan Levy in anything outside. I still have to see Happiest Season personally, but I haven't seen him in anything outside of crap. I can't remember the name of the show off the top of my head.
Schitt's Creek.
Yes, Schitt's Creek. Yes, I haven't seen him in that. My other pick, though, that's a very traditional route. A pick would be Olivia Munn.
Okay. I'm not a huge Olivia Munn fan, but I like where your head's at. I'm just not the biggest her fan. But why her out of like any actress?
Well, Olivia Munn, I think she's very not overrated. She's very underrated for being not only a comedic actress, but I feel like she's really wonderful with darker roles as well. And I feel like she could really bring that out. And I feel like especially you can go into the very stereotype of like you said, with a ball busting female business executive kind of role. But also she can really amp it up a little bit even more so because she is, from what I remember, I feel like she she did come out as being bisexual. So you can come out that aspect where people are kind of making her seem like to be this, not only this this horrible bitch that's like has everyone that doesn't like anyone or whatever the situation is. But I can totally see her being in this role where everyone kind of hates her as a result. And I think she's
because the actress is bisexual, or maybe I'm saying it because the actress is bisexual, or because the character is supposed to be bisexual.
Oh, I mean, like, I don't feel like the character needs to be bisexual, but you can take that kind of route when it comes to the script, where you can involve, you know, her many different types of relationships she has been in the past, where because I have some friends that are of the LGBT community in particular that have mentioned that being someone that is bisexual, they feel like a pariah within that small community because they don't identify as lesbian, or they don't identify as straight. But being bisexual, it can feel very isolating, even within the LGBT community in particular. And I feel like that, you know, you can kind of create this idea that maybe she's not so much maybe she's not being isolated in this movie, but people are purposely kind of making her not welcome, especially in a business environment and in personal relationships as well.
Well, yeah, I think that just changed the story of the Christmas story a little bit, because Christmas Carol a little bit, because it is, I think, again, what I really liked about that Charlize fan casting is that it doesn't put her sexuality front and center, and it doesn't make it the story. I think that's the real important thing, because really the story is about somebody who's eschewed human relationships of any kind, of familiar kind, of like eschewing their family, eschewing romance in favor of working all the time. And that isn't about sexuality preference or being treated a certain way by other people. That's about making a personal choice and like foregoing romance. So I really don't think like the sexuality needs to be, especially the actress's sexuality, needs to be front and center of it. Another person that I thought would be really good, though, and bring it back a little bit to ideas of like, you know, non-traditional casting, was I would think Idris Elba would be like the best Scrooged I've ever seen. Like, wouldn't Idris Elba, did you see Idris Elba saying "bah humbug" in that British accent and like just being the best? Like, amazing.
Like, oh my gosh.
Right? I mean, like, also like the idea that Idris Elba like playing that kind of character who just like is too, it's kind of like being Charles Minor from The Office. Like, he's too busy for personal relationships. He's just a jerk at work, and like he's all business. Yeah. I would love to see him interacting with the ghosts, you know, and getting sort of goofier and sillier progressively as the movie goes on. I'd love to see that. He was my other pick.
I just changed my mind. Okay, I got it.
Okay, what do you got?
Kristen Bell.
She'd be great. Yeah, it's sort of like her character in The Good Place.
Oh my gosh. I just finished watching The Good Place last week, and I not only did it bawl my eyes out, but she is so great with physical comedy.
She is.
And
she's really good.
I think she's great with like dry comedy, obviously, but I feel like especially in physical comedy, if you kind of bring in a lot of the physical comedy aspects back into the Scrooge story, oh my gosh, it would be hilarious.
It would be hilarious. I would recommend, because I didn't even get as far as seeing who they cast as the ghost, and I wouldn't even try to do it here, but I would say, guys, go check out Ben and Sabrina's Cocktails and Casting to see who they have picked, and go vote. I think they have the polls open for like the rest of the week for their fan castings. I'm sure it's amazing. I mean, I just got so excited when I heard Charlize. I was like, that's perfect. And maybe because I thought of Idris because I just saw Prometheus. And I was like, oh, hey, those two also exist in the extended Fast and Furious universe. Like they could Prometheus could be a Fast and Furious follow-up film that takes place in space. But that's neither here nor there, folks. But anyway, yeah. So do you want to talk about the film we have going on for next week? Because this is the last of our Christmas movies, which is, for me, very exciting. I'm not a huge Christmas person. I'm not a huge Christmas movie person. Bah humbug.
Yeah, I feel like that would be for sure an argument over which decade has the best Christmas movies.
Yeah,
that'd be an intense one.
But next week we're actually tackling something that is rare, sort of as rare as finding a Thanksgiving movie, which is finding a New Year's movie. And no, we're not talking about doing New Year's Eve because we are not sadists and we're not going to subject you to Gary Marshall this time of year. But we are doing a movie that I have not seen, but Alex has, and I'm ashamed to have not seen it. So we are doing. There's something wrong with me for having not seen this movie, except that I don't like dramas.
I'm so excited. We're doing it's our first P.T. Anderson movie here on Cinema Bias. Guys, it is a movie set that takes place over the new year. It is P.T. Anderson's Phantom Thread.
Woo! Yes. Starring Daniel Day-Lewis, who my mom has a crush on, and someone else. Looks like somebody else. She famous?
This movie has a lot of this movie is definitely a love it or hate it kind of movie, because I've heard a lot of people describe it as snooze fest. I've heard a lot of people talk about it as like his best movie. I've heard a lot of people just you don't know where you're going to be. It's because it's a very slow burn movie, and I absolutely love it. I cannot wait to dive into this movie. It's so weird, but I dig it so much for so many reasons. All right.
I'm really excited to see it.
Okay, so like I said, this is going to be our last movie of 2020, and I encourage you guys to head on over to our individual letterboxes, where we have compiled our own individual lists of movies that we haven't seen. So please hop on over and let us know.
This is not our last movie for 2020, unless are you not available next week? Because the 29th is next Friday. Or sorry, next Tuesday.
So next week, the 29th, is going to be our last movie of 2020.
Yes, there we go. That's what it is.
Yeah. Okay. And so the next one after that is going to be the 5th of 2021. Right. Mm-hmm.
Can't wait for this year to be over. Who's excited for this year to just be in the history books?
Oh my gosh. Can you imagine how historians or historians or teachers are going to look back and teach this one year?
Nope. Nope. Do not envy them at all. So guys, like Alex says, we both have our individual letterbox. We also have a Cinema Bias account that you can find on either of our letterbox, where you can see movies that one or both of us haven't seen. If you sign up for the Patreon, patreon.com/VideoDrew, you get to come on for one of the tiers. You can suggest a movie for Cinema Bias and come on and discuss it with us. We have a couple of guests that we are locking in for 2021. This should be really fun, because I really like having guests on. We had a really good time with Matt Singer last week from Screen Crush. So Alex, you got anything to plug for this week?
Honestly, no, not really. I'm going to be, like I said, I'm still having Schmoebaits on hiatus with everything going on. It's just not something I have the time to do right now, but definitely check out the Call to Action podcast, which I am actively a part of. We were just nominated for Schmoedown After Show of the Year, which I am so incredibly grateful and proud of overall, since the nominations have been announced. So thank you.
Hey, look, you're nominated for something this year. I'm not.
What?
Said you're nominated for something this year. I'm not. Just kidding.
Not yet.
No. Yet, girl. Congratulations on the nomination. You guys won last year, didn't you, for Best After Show? So that's awesome.
We did. Yes. Yeah, we did.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Right
there.
Can people vote for them? Can people vote for the Schmo awards, or I can't remember if that's just like an internal thing.
Yeah, so you can vote in the survey that, so essentially they had the initial survey with like 10 or 15 options, and then only the top like 5 or 6 options are actually put into the official nominations for the year, and then patrons and everyone get to vote.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, congratulations on that. As for me, you can find me here. I think tonight we're doing at 11 p.m. Me and NerdChronic are doing the Mario Kart Party, whatever that is. We're doing that with William Bibiani and Whitney Seibold over at PJ Campbell at the PJ Campbell Network. So go check us out at 11 p.m. Pacific time. I know that's late for some of you. Otherwise, I do VideoChronic pop culture quizzes on Mondays and Thursdays. That's right here at 9 p.m. We just did a short-term 12 one. That was really fun. It was really cool because Eric got to take the quiz. We had Chris Engel write it. So that was actually awesome. At Fridays, I don't know what we're going to be doing. We've traditionally been doing video karaoke, but that's going to change because the Twitch Sings is leaving us on January 1st. So I'm getting back into like normal Twitching. I'm figuring it out. I'm playing some games. I'm starting to work my way around that system. So look for me on Twitch probably around then. And then Sunday nights at 9 p.m. I do Live in the Dark with VideoDREW, which is my kayfabe show. And if you haven't already, check out the episode we just did this week that has a lot of special guest stars, including someone I'm sharing the screen with right now, for our rendition of A Christmas Carol, which was really fun. It had a lot of special guests and was very fun to do. So thank you guys all for joining us. We will see you next week, if not before. And then, yeah, for everybody else, happy Christmas and have a good holiday. Okay, bye.
Thank you.